Welcome to this post on Viking archaeology, in which I will discuss new discoveries relating to boat burials and ship graves. There's probably no part of Viking Age archaeology which captures the imagination more than the great ship burials. These are finds such as the Gokstad ship burial, which is buried around 890 in a mountain Vestfold in Norway and excavated in 1880, now on display at the Viking Ship Museum in Oslo. Or the Oseberg ship, which was buried in 834, just some 25 kilometers to the north of Gokstad, and excavated in 1904 and 05, also at the Oslo Viking Ship Museum, with its extraordinary grave goods and amazing wood carvings. There's also the Edøy ship, which was buried around 900 in Fyn in Denmark and excavated in 1935. You can see that ship in the mound where it was found. A museum has been put in a vault there. It's well worth a visit. These and many other extraordinary graves have been crucial for research on many aspects of the Viking Age, and certainly they also match most people's imagination of the Viking Age. What could be more Viking than being buried in a ship? However, this was not the only way of being buried with a ship. You could also be buried with a symbolic ship set out of large stones. This is what we see here at Vejerslev in Jutland, where such a stone ship setting was investigated by Moesgaard Museum in 2017. This was almost 90 meter long, one of the largest found. Many others would be just about the size of real ships, between 10 to 20 meters. So there was the remain of a cremation grave found in this burial, going back to around 600 AD, so 200 years before the Viking Age. So this symbolic significance of boat and ships went far back before the Vikings. In fact, it was part of a much wider custom of burying dead people in boats, probably as a means of transporting them to the afterlife. This was widespread in Scandinavia and existed centuries before the Viking Age. There are some new discoveries that give excellent examples of this kind of graves from the Viking Age. So not the big monumental ship graves, but ordinary boat graves. This is an example that was recently found and excavated 2017 at Hillesøy near Tromsø in North Norway. This was a boat which was just about 5 meters long. It was made for rowing. It was partly sewn together, and it contained a made-up burial with weapons and beautiful comb and other equipment, including claws from a bear. Probably there was a bear fell in the grave. This man was put to rest around 800, so just about the time when the Viking Age started. And it's interesting, I think, that among the objects, there's a little amber bead, which must probably have come from southern Scandinavia, where amber could be found on the beaches. So although this is a little boat, it emphasizes just how much the boat was part of your infrastructure in your life if you were living in Scandinavia at this time. And in some way, how far it could take you, or how far it could relate you to networks that went very far. There's also another grave that was found at this cemetery at Hillesøy. This was a woman's grave, and she was probably buried perhaps a little bit earlier, in the late 700s or early 800s. Her boat was rather bigger than that of the man, 8.5 meters, and she had a beautiful set of ornaments. You can see them here. You can actually find the full reports of these excavations at the website of the University of Tromsø, and I'll give the link in the description to this video. Another rather larger boat grave, but still a boat grave, has recently been published from Sweden. This boat comes from the Valsgärde cemetery, which is famous for its rich boat burials from the 600s and 700s, so before the Viking Age again. A number of Viking Age graves were also excavated here, but because the earlier finds took much of their attention, these were left partly unpublished. And one of the unpublished boats were this one, Valsgärde 14, which is a really fine early Viking Age boat, excavated in 1949 by Elsa Nordahl. She died in 2011, but her text for the publication has now been completed and published as part of a new attempt to fully present the Valsgärde finds. This work is part of the Viking Phenomenon project led by Neil Price at the Uppsala University. The Valsgärde 14 boat would have been about 11.8 meters long and 2 meters wide, and a replica of it was actually built in 1985 as the boat Allmäe, which is now at the Jämtland County Museum. The grave goods put with this inhumation included a set of weapons, a chest, a gaming board, a bucket, 2 dogs with their leashes, a horse with beautiful headpiece, and all this was probably buried with the probably male deceased around 800, perhaps even a little earlier. This is not a publication that brings out any shocking new revelations, but it's a really neat example of a large early Viking Age rowing vessel, probably meant for cruising the Great Swedish Lakes. Recently, the media has been bustling with reports of a new exciting find at Gjellestad near Halden in southeast Norway. Using ground-penetrating radar on a ploughed-over cemetery in 2018, the Norwegian Institute of Cultural Heritage Research identified the clear outline of a 20-meter-long ship which had been placed under a mound. There were small test excavations conducted in late 2019, following a drainage ditch which had cut through the remains of this ship, and they revealed that some wood is preserved from this vessel. Some months ago, in January 2020, a tree ring date was announced for the fragments of the keel which had been retrieved, showing that the vessel was probably buried between the late 8th and 9th century. So it's probably another early Viking Age ship grave from the early Viking Age or just the generation before the Viking Age. So far, that's all we know about the ship, but excavations are being planned, so we're likely to learn more. As if that wasn't enough, the Norwegian Institute for Cultural Heritage Research has recently announced in late 2019 that another ship burial has been found using ground-penetrating radar, this time at Edøy in Møre and Romsdal County in western Norway. So far, the ground-penetrating radar images have shown us a keel of at least 13 meters, and this is all we know for now, but it is another find that shows how much potential we still have for learning more from archaeology. The most spectacular new boat burial to emerge in recent years is probably the Salme burials, 2 boats discovered on the island of Salme in Estonia in 2010. These were really spectacular finds. The Salme 1 boat is 11.5 meters, the Salme 2 is about 17 meters, and with them were buried more than 40 warriors who had been killed in battle. They have been determined by Isotopic and DNA analysis to be a crew from Sweden. The grave goods show that the burial took place around 750, so prior to what we usually see as the beginning of the Viking Age, and the findings thus led to new debates about when we should actually put the start of the Viking Age. Details of the construction even suggest that Salme 2 may have carried a sail. However, Salme appears to be quite a different story from most other ship graves. It was not covered by a monumental mound, and perhaps it was rather a contingency solution in the aftermath of a battle than anything that was planned to be a great monument. If we really want to grasp the idea behind the great monumental ship burials, the place to start may be at Karmøy in western Norway. Jan Bill of the Viking Ship Museum of Oslo has recently published a thought-provoking new study in this book here, in which he studies 2 important but often forgotten ship graves found here. The Storhaug ship grave was excavated in 1886 and 7, partly by a local school teacher, and some parts of this rich find is not so well documented. In 2009, tree ring datings revealed that the burial was made in 779, and the ship was at least 19 meters long and probably a rowing vessel. The Grønhaug ship was excavated in 1902, and what had clearly been a rich burial had been thoroughly plundered, but the vessel in the grave was at least 15 meters long. Again, tree ring dates have been obtained for this ship. It was built around 780 and probably buried about 10 years later in 790 or thereabout. Jan Bill has tried to put these graves and other monumental ship graves into a common framework. He sees the Grønhaug and Storhaug ship graves as a political statement made by new rulers at this pivotal place, which pretty much controlled the Norwegian coastal sailing route. He suggests that this way of demonstrating power may link Norway to the much earlier Sutton Hoo ship burial in East Anglia. The idea is that the East Anglia find, which is probably related to myths of a Scandinavian origin for the kings buried here in the early 600s, would have been an object of local lore as reflected, amongst other things, in the Beowulf poem, where we also hear of royal burials in a ship. And perhaps the fact that this kind of burial suddenly shows up for real in Western Norway reflects the fact that new contacts were being forged, perhaps not directly overseas from Norway to Scotland, Northern England at this stage, say in the late 770s, but perhaps at this stage more through the southern route going along the coast of Denmark and to southern England, which would exactly match with the area where the Sutton Hoo ship burial is found. Now, he then goes on to argue that similar later ship graves, including Oseberg and Gokstad, would have reenacted the symbolism introduced with the Grønhaug and Storhaug burials. In this way, Jan Bill is actually suggesting that the ship graves is something that spreads in the manner of a meme. Now, some people today associate memes with funny pictures shared on social media. But of course, the original phrase was coined by the biologist Richard Dawkins to denote an idea that spreads in the way that genes spreads, something that floats in a pool and is being picked up and recombined in new situations. And that's pretty much what Jan Bill suggests. So perhaps that's how we should see the great monumental ship graves, as something that could occasionally be picked up from a common pool of inspirations and used to assert rulerships in particular situations. Now, thank you for joining me for this review of new research on Viking Age boat burials and ship graves. Please come back again for more posts on new discoveries in Viking Age archaeology.